Hey everybody, Leah Klett here with the Christian Post, and my guest today is Willie Robertson, who you may know from the reality show Duck Dynasty. He is also a best-selling author, and his latest book is titled Gospeller: Turning Darkness into Light, One Conversation at a Time. I love that it's on your hat.
My wife got me that for my birthday. So yeah,
I
this is the
love it.
this is the only one in existence, I believe.
Hey, you got to market that.
Maybe so.
All right, well, this book, Gospeller, is the first book where you're really discussing your own faith and spiritual walk so candidly. From what I've seen throughout your career, why did you write this book? Why did you want to talk about this topic right now?
Um, that's a good question. I guess the timing. I think this is something I wanted to capture and put onto into a book. COVID kind of helped with this because I wasn't able to go travel and speak and make appearances like I do, and so yeah, I was like, I ended up here and I ended up teaching a class about how to share your faith at a local church. And then I was telling another guy about it, and he was like, I've never quite seen it like that. You should put that down in a book. And so I started writing, and that's how it began.
Why are you so passionate about sharing your faith in the form of a spiritual conversation rather than a kind of confrontational, preachy way?
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's one thing. One of the hardest things about writing the book was to not get that way, to not get confrontational, and this is not an argument. And so I think when I was younger, I used to, do that, and I would kind of get into arguments, and then, then I was like, I'm not arguing. Like, I have a message, and if this can help you, great, and I'll be the one to share it for sure. But we're not going to argue about it. And so I was real cautious of that. And then I wanted to take the stories of the Bible, uh, particularly of the New Testament, where people didn't know and they were taught and they made this decision and life change. And what was said, what happened, when was it? Um, and most of those are in the book of Acts. We find some in the Gospels for sure, but the whole gospel hadn't taken place because Jesus hadn't died yet or been resurrected. So, which was the validation of what he was saying was going to happen. So people needed to see that happen to see if it was true or not. Once that happened, then that little sliver of what did Jesus tell people before he left. So I thought that was very important. Kind of what were the last instructions to do, and then so I wanted all those captured, and then I wanted to tell stories of when I had talked to people, because the whole ultimate goal of the book is for people or the church is to feel confident enough to actually have a conversation that's looking for change and feel empowered to where they can do that. In teaching the class, I heard a lot of excuses as to why they didn't or why they couldn't. It was like, I don't know the Bible well enough. My life's not in order. I'm not the one. That's not my gift. I mean, there was a lot of excuses as to what held people back. And so I wanted to kind of break those down, share stories that I had shared that were successful, which is hard to argue with that. It's that's not argumentative. It's like I was talking to a person, I told them this, we had this kind of conversation. This is what happened. And and also I think it seems like kind of like the word itself, gospel, used to be a common word in language, and now it's not. And I really think just the whole idea of sharing your faith seems kind of old timey. The word evangelism seems really old timey, and so a lot of believers have tied this into now the church, and I guess that's the church's responsibility. That happens at a church service, which I find is one of the hardest places to actually probably have a conversation, right? Is at a gathering that's a church. You typically have one guy speaking or one or two people actually communicating with people. You have music, and then you show up, and then you leave. And so, there's not a lot of time for conversation to happen. So, and even people that may make that life change, oftentimes what I found is that they rarely have conversations either. They raise a hand, they leave, and I guess there's a hope that they email or make some sort of connection. But and so I wanted this more for like the conversations. I think real revival and impact will happen when the church actually is sharing their faith, not necessarily just a pastor at one thing. And so, I mean, I guess the shortest version of that is if you have a building full of 1,000 people and you have one guy talking, if you want to get a message out, would you take the one guy or would you take the 1,000? I'll take the 1,000 every day, as far as to get some message um, out to people. And so, it's an attempt to wake up people and say, hey, this can happen on Tuesdays and Thursday nights and Saturday mornings, and with people perhaps with people you don't know. And so, and I kind of made the case for why it's important and why I think the call is for everyone. It's not just for smart people or just the disciples or the apostles or pastors and everybody else. We're kind of exempt from talking about that. So I tried to make that case and how we have to care for people to even engage. Why would you even have a conversation? Which I think is probably one of the biggest parts of the book is if you miss that, if you don't care about people enough, then you won't talk to them. And so, like, maybe not around where I live, but like I find that in big urban areas, you find this where all these people live beside each other and they walk past each other. Someone may fall out and be dying in a sidewalk, and so many people just step over them and just keep going. They just don't, or you don't want to get involved in other people's lives and their mess and their problems. You got your own thing. We become real self-centered. We look at our own stuff, and I think the nature of Christianity, what Jesus was trying to teach was it's all about sharing with other people. Jesus was like, I came to seek and save what was lost, so Jesus wasn't here for himself. He was here for other people. And I think that was the message he was saying. This is for other people. If you have it, great. Now go out and help other people and share it with them, the lost or the ones who don't. I'll lead the 99 sheep to find the one, and so I try to lay that case out, get people interested in that, give people at least a little method. It's not the only one. It's just it's the one that I use. So I use about generally 7 passages, 7 texts that I'll generally around. If people need more, I will. But so therefore, you kill this idea like I have to know the entire Bible. It's a giant book, and it's there's an Old Testament, New Testament. There's so much in there, and I think people just kind of it's like the ocean. They just feel like I can't grasp it, so I don't know how to deal with it. But if we can break it down into those stories, into some stuff that makes sense for like a front line, like if you don't have faith, and how do I cross that line? What are some things you would need to know? Kind of like if someone were getting married, like someone says, "Hey, Willie, I'm considering getting married. I'm dating someone. What are some things?" I wouldn't give them a giant book of like read every part of this. A lot of it you'll have to learn, but before you make the decision, you probably need to know a few ground rules. Like here's some ideas, and so that's kind of so the ideas of repentance or baptism or what does confess in Jesus's name, sin. Some of those things we need to discuss, and I just love those in a conversation, and those are the answers that I try to help people find and discover, and also talk about their story. Where they are, man. People come to me with like all kind of different stories. They've been so I may talk about a church as being a positive idea. I talked to a guy 2 days ago at the airport. Church was a negative idea. It was really negative to him. He's like, oh, I hate the church. I grew up in this, and and so you're like, even the idea of a father in heaven, and for a lot of people, a father figure is not positive. So I think there's a lot of damage and baggage that people have that they need to kind of get through it. And there may be something that's held them up from actually having a great relationship with Jesus. And so we don't know until we get into the story. And I highlight John chapter 4, the woman at the well. And I thought Jesus taught a master class on that, of like how to start a conversation. It was someone he probably shouldn't have even have been talking to. And he talks to a woman, and just by talking to her, he shows that he cares about her, was interested. But all he asked her was, can I get a drink of water? That's where it started. And so that's as simple as it can start. And the chapter ends with the whole village coming to the Lord and her life being turned around. They talked about her story. She gives him part of it, not the whole story, which I find is normal. She just met the guy, so she's not going to go into all these marriages she's had and failed and all that. And so, but Jesus kept digging in more because he was looking for change. And I think the conversations of turning darkness to light, um, the ones where you're actually looking to help and looking for change, you're not just having a conversation just to go like, well, hate that for you. I'll say a prayer for you and move on. Like, I want to be able to take them all the way through and say, if you're ready to, um, make that step, or if I can hold your hand making that step, and let's go. Let me try to help you. We find that in Acts chapter 2, the first sermon preached since Jesus after he's resurrected. At the end, where Peter says, with many other words, he warned them and pleaded with them, save yourself from this corrupt generation. So he was pleading with them, like going, look, let's go. Let's, make that decision. Let's move on. And so I think a little pressure is okay. I don't like to talk people into something or pressure, but if I see somebody living their life in a way, let's just take it out of the spiritual realm and put it in if I see a guy racing down the highway and I just came from there and there's a big stacked up wreck and he's going 100 miles an hour, I'm trying to stop him, like, buddy, you're fixing to be in a world of hurt. I'd show my kids if they were heading towards something dangerous, I would try to stop them. So I don't see it any differently in the spiritual realm where I'm like, man, you're destroying your life, living like this. There's a better way. There's another way you can live. And so it's not as preachery. I mean, I guess some people could see it that way just by having a conversation, but I think that's what Jesus called us to do. And I think there's definitely going to be some uncomfortableness there, but I definitely think it's a conversation. If someone says, hey, that ain't for me, and I appreciate you, if nothing else, they know that I cared about them. I wanted nothing from them. I didn't need anything from them. I was just sharing this because, it's worked great for our lives and it gives us hope. And hopefully they can see something different in us than they can see people that don't have something to believe in like that.
Well, I think your family's such a great example of that. We see you we've seen you guys on screen for years, but what's always really stuck out to me is how many people in your family are walking with the Lord and are using their platforms to share the gospel. Talk about this concept of a gospel genealogy, which is something you talk about in your book, and how readers can cultivate their spiritual family by sharing their faith. And as an extension of that, how parents can raise children who know and love the Lord.
I think an authentic walk with God is probably the best thing, for sure. The best thing that you can do for your kids is not just telling them, but showing them, because I think that gets misconstrued. Parents will say something and then they're not living it out. And so the kids can figure that out. They'll say, oh, we're Christians, and they'll go to church and then they'll see their parents act a completely different way, outside of that environment. So I think the authenticity, and it's one thing that I saw for sure growing up, was just, it was number one, and there was no doubt. I mean, there was no doubt. And I was in the house, so I was there. I can speak to that because I saw it, and I saw the passion that particularly my father had for sharing his faith. I watched him just countless thousands and thousands of hours just pouring into other people, and there was nothing in advantage for him with them, whether or not they came to the Lord, didn't, or whatever. He just poured out, and he was looking for that life change. And if he could send them along their way with the gospel and with a new relationship with Jesus, that was most important, more than business, more than hunting or fishing or anything. That was most important. And so I saw that lived out. The gospel genealogy, it was a few things. We came up with a blind movie last year about Phil and Kay's life, and after when I thought about that, I thought, what if that hadn't happened? Like, what if the guy wouldn't have went up there? What if he wouldn't have preached the gospel to Phil? What if he would have been like, there's no way I'm going in there talking to that guy? Dad had not become a Christian. He had already kicked us out. So we knew where it was headed. It was heading towards divorce for sure, split up family. So when you take Dad out of the mix, there would have been no Duck Commander. There would have been no company, which there would have been no Duck Dynasty because there would have been no company. I don't even know that I'm a believer today. I met Corey at a church camp. Part of the church camp and the church was this newfound, faith that they had found, which is where I met her. So pretty much every day of my life, everybody, even talking to you and whoever's listening to this, has been impacted by that, what happened 50 years ago. Them two turned their lives around. That was one couple with 3 kids. And that's not to say that well, see what God did for us, like once we turned to him, everything got great. That's not even the point. The point is, if it would have just affected mom and dad and our family and kept us together, it would have been completely worth it. Forget the company or forget, TV or anything like that. But because of what was able to come out of that, because of all when you start thinking about the television show that reached hundreds of millions of people, still does every day. Show ends in a prayer, something positive. All the books, the movies, the podcasts, just all the things that have pointed people in some way to the gospel. That's a light. I can trace all that back, at least with our family, to that one couple with the bunch of little boys that run around, and then now we can see that manifested in my kids, will be my grandkids, my dad's grandkids. I mean, it just pours out. So how that helps me in the future is to think when I'm talking to someone and they may be as lost as a goose, or terrible people, which is where dad was for sure. When I'm telling somebody that, I have no idea that person, all the impacts that's going to have, not just for them, but generationally for their kids, and how they live a different life, whether or not their marriage stays together, whether or not they keep a job because they're now they've straightened their lives out and live for Jesus. So I think we like tracing our genealogy, like, oh, where did we come from, and like we can find that through our lineage and through blood and through our family. And most of us can't go back that far of people we don't know. And so I just started thinking of that idea of the spiritual, like what did it take to get this here and to get the message across. And so and we know that the message was shared because it had to have been, because it happened 2,000 years ago, halfway across the planet from where we're at, in a completely different language. So somebody has passed it along all the way to get to America, to where we're at, to where we're still talking about it today. And so that was the idea. So hopefully it's an appreciation to look back. I think it's one reason that we've been so diehard on our faith and haven't lost it, because we feel like everything we have was a result of that anyway. So there's certainly appreciation of the past, but also looking forward to the future of whose lives can we help move in a better direction by who we talk to. And you don't know, the preacher, I talk about that in the book, that's like, even more than on the movie, like he had no idea who he was talking to. However, my dad's sister, my aunt, she said, if you convert Phil, he'll convert 1,000. Now how she saw that, I have no idea. Like, 'cause it didn't look like he would come to the Lord. But so I can just imagine that preacher driving back home going, I have no idea what's going to turn out there. Who knows, and because these people had no money, no fame, we had nothing, that would show that we'd ever do anything or be anything. So, but as it turned out, it was a huge impact. And so, and we've seen that with other, like Billy Graham. You go back to where he was converted and how'd he get there, and all that they've done in the future. So, so yeah, I think that's neat, and the message I love about that is there's always hope.
Mhm.
So even for the person that you're like, there's no way my uncle, or there's no way my dad, or like I just can't see any hope there. There's hope. There is hope that they can change, turn around, and become something new. And I think that's the beautiful message of Christianity in of itself, is that there's always hope.
And if there's one takeaway you want readers to get from your new book, what is it?
I think it's just have the confidence that you can sit down and have a conversation, or do it in some other way, even if it's online or something you start posting or something you start taking in that you can share with others. And hopefully the book will spark some ideas. It may not be the exact way that you do it, or you may not do it like I do, but if it sparks an idea, and if one person can hear the gospel because you read a book, then I think it's worth it.